Truth is far more accessible and, frankly, way more fascinating than any secret trick.
So, you gotta ask, was it just luck? Did he really just buy the exact right stock at the absolute perfect moment? We all kind of love the myth of the overnight billionaire, mostly because it makes massive success feel like a lottery ticket, something completely out of our control. It totally strips us of our own agency. But the historical data of Buffett's life absolutely shatters that myth. If we truly want to understand his success, we have to stop looking for a sudden stroke of luck, stop hunting for that winning lottery ticket, and start looking really intensely at his daily routine.
Because here is the real secret to his status as a global financial titan, and it's almost shockingly mundane. It literally all comes down to simple daily habits, practiced consistently over many, many years. We're talking about unsexy, repetitive actions that anyone, and I mean anyone, can take, but very few people actually have the psychological discipline to repeat day in and day out. His monumental wealth? It's really just the direct result of compounding everyday actions. To truly get how this invisible force works, we need to rewind all the way back to the very beginning of his journey.
Even when Warren was just a kid, he intuitively understood something most adults never quite grasp: opportunity cost. While the other kids were outside playing games, or whatever the 1940s equivalent of leveling up in a video game was, young Warren was trying to level up his understanding of corporate balance sheets. Seriously. From an incredibly young age, he operated on this core belief that knowledge was the absolute most valuable asset anyone could possibly own. He was systematically hoarding information while his peers were just playing. He viewed his time as an investment vehicle way before he had any actual capital to invest.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how that childhood curiosity completely solidified into a relentless, lifelong routine. As he grew older, this one habit basically never changed. Every single day, Buffett dedicated an astonishing amount of time to reading. We are talking about reading up to 500 pages a day at the peak of his career. His regimen included multiple daily newspapers, hundreds of incredibly dry annual reports from different companies, and countless thick books. He wasn't just casually skimming headlines to sound smart at a dinner party. He was deeply, obsessively immersing himself in the mechanics of businesses and the economy. It was this relentless intake of raw information.
And that brings us to a really foundational concept. Buffett once famously observed that knowledge builds up like compound interest. Take a second to really let the weight of that metaphor sink in. You already know how compound interest explodes wealth over time in a financial portfolio, right? How a few dollars saved today turns into an absolute mountain of cash decades later. Well, Buffett realized the exact same mathematical principle applies to the brain. The more mental models and industry facts you learn today, the more valuable your analytical decisions become tomorrow. It's essentially an intellectual snowball effect.
Think of this compound interest of knowledge as a deeply interconnected mental framework. Every single annual report Buffett read wasn't just useful for that specific day or even for one specific trade. No, it became a permanent structural beam in his mind. So when a wildly complex new opportunity popped up a full decade later, he didn't have to start his research from scratch. He could evaluate it with absolute precision because he had thousands of days of compounded knowledge backing up his judgment. His brain was already preloaded with the exact context he needed to act swiftly and accurately.
So, the crucial point here is how this compounded knowledge actually translates into real market behavior. And the contrast? It's night and day. The average investor is frantic. They rush to buy and sell based on a trending headline, raw emotion, or pure market panic. But Warren Buffett, on the other hand, relies on his legendary patience. Because he's already put in the thousands of hours of foundational reading, he carefully studies companies from every possible angle before making a single move. He isn't guessing out there, he is calculating.
And this is the true architecture of his patience. Step 1, study the companies carefully, utilizing that massive compounded reservoir of historical knowledge. Step 2, focus entirely on building wealth over time, completely rejecting the seductive but highly dangerous idea of overnight riches. He deeply understood that true wealth generation is a slow, highly methodical process. It literally rewards those who can just sit on their hands. But here's the thing, this discipline wasn't just limited to the stock market. It dictated his entire life.
He applied this exact same rigorous patience to his lifestyle. Even as his net worth skyrocketed into the billions, he famously continued to live in the exact same modest Omaha house he bought back in 1958. He actively dodged unnecessary luxury so his capital could just continue to snowball. And he treated his social circle the exact same way. He actively curated a room full of intelligent mentors, deliberately avoided toxic or frantic personalities, and continuously improved his thinking by really listening to others. He protected his capital for sure, but he also fiercely protected his mental environment.
Of course, none of this matters if you totally panic the moment the market takes a dive. Perhaps the ultimate test of his daily habits was his almost eerie calmness during market crashes and periods of deep economic terror. When everyone else was screaming to sell, he just followed his plan. Why? Because his mindset was protected by the preparation he had done every single day prior. He didn't let external noise or mass hysteria disrupt his long-term reality. His emotional control was really just a byproduct of his relentless daily discipline.
And this brilliantly illustrates how the timeline becomes incredibly clear when you zoom out. You start with decades of unglamorous habits, reading dry annual reports, skipping the fancy cars, studying totally mundane business models. That foundational work gives you the psychological strength to spend years staying disciplined through the inevitable market crashes and recessions. And the result of that long, unsexy timeline is the extraordinary reality of today. It is the sheer, uninterrupted passage of time that turns these simple daily habits into an unstoppable engine of success.
Which brings us to a vital realization. Honestly, if you take away anything from our time exploring this material today, it should be the total destruction of the number one. Success is absolutely not created by one big moment. It's not one lucky trade you overhear at a dinner party. It's not one brilliant startup idea. And it is certainly not one sudden stroke of absolute genius. Looking for that one big moment, waiting around for lightning to strike, it's simply a massive distraction from doing the real work. The magic bullet does not exist.
The true formula is simple. Small daily habits plus time equals extraordinary success. Whether it's carving out an hour to read deeply, choosing to invest a small percentage of your paycheck instead of blowing it, or seeking out a solid conversation with a mentor, these are tiny, almost invisible actions. But when you repeat them relentlessly, they compound. Buffett's life proves that if you start improving yourself every single day, the math basically guarantees your future will become greater than you can currently imagine.
So I want to leave you with this final question to really chew on. We've seen how reading, relentless patience, and holistic discipline compounded into literal billions for Warren Buffett. The mechanism absolutely works. It just requires you to start the clock. So, what small habit will you start compounding today?